Gust effects are nowadays a staple when building a Pokemon deck. If you're a new player, you might be thinking of Buzzsaw or Counter Catcher. Go back a little bit and you're possibly thinking of Gust or even Lysander. But what is a Gust effect? What makes them useful or important? How many have we had? What has been the most powerful one we've ever had? And why are they even called Gust effects in the first place? Well, I'm TheRainbowPitt, and I'm here so we can all learn about this together. So let's start backwards with the last question, ironically going to the very beginning. Base set. Gust of Wind was the first ever Gust effect, as I said, printed all the way back in base set, the very first Pokemon trading card game set. This is the very reason for the term Gust that we use today. It comes from this card, Gust of Wind. But what does it actually do? Well, the card reads, Trainer, choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and switch it with his or her active Pokemon. As per the text, a Gust effect is as simple as it gets: a card, be an item, supporter, Pokemon, or anything else that lets you, and this is important, it lets you pick a Pokemon from your opponent's bench to bring into the active slot. So yes, the effect has been a staple of this game since the very beginning. Even though there was not an actual meta game back then, Gust of Wind was still instrumental. It was used for disrupting your opponent's plan, getting or finishing KOs, or buying yourself extra turns by bringing up a Pokemon they could not easily retrieve. Now the next question, or prior I guess. How many of these cards have we actually had? And honestly, plenty. In between items, supporters, and Pokemon's abilities, there are around 80 different cards. And that was still while ignoring Pokemon attacks, tools, stadiums, and many other types of cards that I might have missed. These cards can be effectively divided in 4 different types. First off, we have supporters. Think of Lysander, Erika's Invitation, even Shanto. Next off, we have Pokemon abilities, like T-Bomb Ninetales 9 Temptations or Evolving Skies Umbreon's Dark Signal. Finally, we have items. These, personally, I divide in 2 different types, unconditional and conditional effects. Unconditional cards are those that will let you always do the Gust effect, just like the original Gust of Wind, no matter what. Although, nowadays, they will have some sort of drawback, like how Double Gust will also allow your opponent to bring one of your own Pokemon into the active slot. Now, conditional cards are those that instead of having a drawback, have an activation cost or a restriction for the effect to happen. Pokemon Catcher needs a head flip in order to Gust. Great Catcher can only be used if you discard 2 other cards from your hand, and Counter Catcher only activates if you're already losing the game. Now, of course, 80 cards are a lot, and I need a longer video to go through all of them. So to answer the final 2 questions, why are they good and which ones have been the best, I'll be focusing primarily on 12 cards. The most used ones, the ones in the top decks, the crème de la crème of Gust effects. And why not? This is YouTube, so let's do the YouTube thing. Let's do a top 10 list with all the best Gust effect cards ever. So to start our top 10, on our 10th slot we have our first of 2 ties on this list, Pokemon Reversal and Pokemon Catcher. These cards have functionally the same text. Flip a coin, if heads, switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. Like we mentioned earlier, these are conditional Gust effects, needing to land a head in order to Gust a Pokemon. But these are still item cards, which are the second easiest to find from the deck, and they give us multiple tries in a single turn. transforming in this way a 50% chance into a 75 or even higher with more uses. Now of course these are not reliable, and sometimes you might miss a crucial Gust that can and will cost you the game. These type of cards are usually the go-to in very fast-paced metas, when you have specific needs for supporter cards to be played on your turn, or when you need multiple Gust effects to slow down your opponent. Like how Temporal Forces Raging Bolt EX uses them because they want to be using Professor Sada's Vitality as supporter every single turn, or how Flashfire Pyroar, trying to control the board, will be running 6 or even more Gust effects in the deck. These cards also tend to be played when there aren't any better options in format, like how during the EX and Heart Gold Soul Silver era, Reversal was the only option. Therefore, it was the only Gust card played in every single deck. But trainers and items are not the only option. Coming on our 9th place we have Umbreon VMAX. This Pokemon has the ability Dark Signal, that reads, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. So basically, when you evolve Umbreon V into Umbreon VMAX, you get a free Gust effect. So this sounds good, right? So why is it all the way down on 9th place? Well, you see, in the Pokemon trading card game, you win by taking all 6 prize cards that are set up at the beginning of the game. So having a 2 prize Pokemon like Umbreon V that evolves into a 3 prize Pokemon like Umbreon VMAX can be a very dangerous place. And on top of that, it is also required to be 1 turn on board before evolving it. So this type of evolving ability gives your opponent time to prepare and maybe even play around it, getting a KO on your Umbreon V or potentially getting rid of what you would be gusting up next turn. In the end, giving your opponent an opening and the time to disrupt you or disrupt your future play. And with talks about disrupting yourself, we move to our 8th place, Double Gust. Now this is more of a worthy card since it's from an older set, Neo Genesis, but basically when you use it, your opponent gets to gust up one of your Pokemon and then you gust one of theirs. So you can easily see the problem here. Allowing your opponent to gust you could potentially disrupt what you were trying to do on your turn, needing them to attach extra energies to retrieve or play some different cards to move your Pokemon from the active slot to the bench. Usually, when cards that force you to bring something up are in format, decks would focus on one of 2 things. Either building extra threats, these are Pokemon that are ready to attack for a lot of damage, so you can swap between one of 2 of them, or having what is referred to as a pivot Pokemon. This is a Pokemon that does something useful in your deck, and that also has a free retreat cost, so that if anything forces you to swap, you can swap that one and go up, and then you can retreat it without spending more resources. In the case of Double Gust and the Neo era decks, most of them would be built around the effect of this card, both having multiple threats and multiple pivots, basically being able to ignore the downside of Double Gust. This was also the only Gust effect in format, but being a non-conditional Gust and decks being built around the downside made it a really good card, and deserving of the 8th spot. When it comes down to building around the downside, that's where our 7th spot card, Lycanroc GX, shines. Like Umbreon VMAX before, Lycanroc GX from Guardian Risings has a Gust evolving ability, Bloodthirsty Eyes. When you evolve this Pokemon from your hand, you may Gust a Pokemon from your opponent's bench. What makes this card better than Umbreon VMAX is that it gives only 2 prizes instead of 3, and it also evolves from a basic regular Rockruff that gives 1 prize instead of 2 like Umbreon V. reducing in this way the liability of using this card to Gust. One more thing to be added is that just like Umbreon VMAX, this Pokemon has an attack that because of weakness and the metagame was very useful in certain matches for getting easy KOs. This being a bonus on the utility side for both the cards, and an extra reason for both of them to be played and to be on this list. On number 6, we have Counter Catcher. You can play this card only if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent. Switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. Now, this is a conditional Gust effect that takes all the positives from Pokemon Catcher being an item without any of its negatives. The only caveat being that you need to already be behind in prices. But this is actually a very easy condition to fulfill in a lot of decks, especially during big 2-prize Pokemon metas, letting or not minding your opponent taking 1 prize in the early game and then being 1 prize behind for the rest of the game, but being able to make a comeback with taking only 2 prize KOs during the rest of the game. Counter Catcher is so good because the condition is easy to achieve, and after that, the card becomes very easy to find, to use, and has virtually no downsides from your end. However, it must be said that sometimes, and in some decks, this card can see little to no play, primarily in fast consistent decks that want to be the one attacking and taking prizes first, making Counter Catcher a good card, but not a must use in every single deck or even format. At 5th place, we have what is my favorite card in this list, and virtually the first ever good evolving Gust Pokemon. That is Rising Rivals Luxury G Level X. Now this card takes all the good things from Umbreon VMAX and Lycanroc GX. The ability, Pokemon being the easiest thing to search in the game, the useful attack that gets some KOs because of weakness, and even evolving from a single prize Pokemon. But Luxury Level X itself, it's also a single prize Pokemon, in this way eliminating the downsides of using it, and also it has a free retreat, making it one of those pivot Pokemon that we talked about earlier. The only downside being that the basics Luxury G would need to be played on prior turns, but most of the decks in format would just play it on the earlier turns in the game, while diverting attention from it with powerful threats attacking that needed to be kept in check by the opponent, making it then hard to both respond to the threat and deal with the Luxury G on the bench. Now in 4th place we have our second and last tie. All 3 of these cards are supporters. All 3 of them do the same thing, and 2 of them even have the same text. And all of them are themed after bad guys from the video games. Yes, I'm talking about Lysander, Guzma, and Boss's Order. Now, all 3 of these cards let you Gust an opponent's Pokemon, with Guzma in addition, making you also to switch one of your Pokemon. But you get to choose. Now, the downside of these cards is that they are supporters. Supporters are a powerful type of card that you only get to play once per turn. So if you use one of these, you will lose the option of using a different powerful supporter. One that might draw you cards or let you search your deck for something that you specifically need. Regardless, these cards have been staples since Lysander came out in Flashfire X and Y, and you can usually find between 2 to 4 copies in every top tier deck. For our 3rd place, we have the original, Gust of Wind. Now we have discussed this card already earlier in the video, and it being an early trainer in base set means that you could use it and many other trainers in the same turn, since supporters were not a thing back then. So why is it on 3rd place? Well, basically, this card being part of a slower and more disruption heavy format means that sometimes Gust of Wind will do nothing but just get you some extra turns. Now, of course, this is still a very powerful play and is something to keep in mind with all Gust effects. But the lack of just being a simple win condition, like in faster formats, is what keeps it away from being on the top 2 spots. Now, for our second place, we have, what is at least at the making of this video, the newest Gust card made, Prime Catcher. This card does the same as Guzma. Switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. If you do, switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. But this is an item, so you don't need to give up the option of using a different supporter on the same turn. This being an item also opens the possibility of just using it to switch your active Pokemon if you ever need to, without being stuck with no draw supporter for turn. Now, what is the drawback of this card? Well, this card it's an ace spec. This is a type of card that you can only have one ace spec in general in your deck. But this being such a powerful effect, an easy to find card, and with having some ways to even reuse it during a match, is what lands it on the second spot of this list, since even right now, this is the most played ace spec in format, and the first or second most played ace spec ever. Now, if you've been counting, I've already talked about 12 different cards, but we're still missing the first place. So what's going on? Do I not know how to count? Did I lie to you? Am I hiding something? Well, no, but actually yes. There is a card that we already mentioned on the list that repeats for the first place, and that would be Pokemon Catcher. But how? Wasn't it the 10th place, I hear you type? Well, when Pokemon Catcher came out for the first time ever in Black and White Emerging Powers, it had a little difference on its text. It said, switch your opponent's active Pokemon with one of his or her bench Pokemon. So this was effectively a Gust of Wind item reprint. No special rules, no coin flips, nothing. This was arguably the best card in format, and at least the very best item. With decks being fast and support Pokemon being plenty, this was a very easy and sure way to punish your opponent's bench. And once EX Pokemon came out in Black and White Next Destinies, the option of taking 2 prize KOs at no extra cost or disadvantage made the card even better. Pokemon Catcher ran freely for a little over 2 years in format, with most decks running between 3 and 4 copies all the way until X and Y came out, and it got changed into the coin flip version we have today. So yes, Pokemon Catcher is both the 10th and the best Gust effect we've ever had. So what actually makes these cards better than any other Gust effect we've ever had? Well, personally, I think it comes down to 3 different categories. First of all, availability. How easy is it for you to get this card out of your deck exactly when you need it? Second off, it's ease of use. This comes all the way back to these restrictions that some of these cards have. So if you were to use this card, how likely are you to actually get what you want it to do? And if it has any restriction, how easy is it to work around the restriction? And then third of all, and finally, is flexibility. If you were to use this card right now, how does it affect your own board state and your own game plan and future turns? Should you be using a different card? Will it cut you off from options? Usually, for all of these cards, multiple of these are very highly ranked, so they have very good scores on either flexibility, availability, or ease of use. And the better cards have very high rankings on all 3 of these. So if you see a new Gust effect coming out, make sure to think about these 3 different things. Some cards might be very good for some specific decks, but may not work for the average deck or the average player. So take all these things into consideration. But in the end, this is just my opinion. So let me know what you think. Maybe you think the old Genesect EX should have been on this list. Maybe you think a completely different card that I didn't saw should be here. Let me know. I'm TheRainbowPitt. Thank you for watching. Good luck on your next game.